I was in an age where in South Sudan, I was old enough to get married. You can go to South Sudan right now and 14 years old are having kids, being married off, because that's the rule there, you know? I had no ground to say I was young, because according to our culture, I was not young. And they were practicing our culture law in America. So they arranged my marriage. We came with a family from Dima refugees camp that knew my family very well. We knew them very well, you know, and that's how they introduced this marriage. You know, they condition you. Culture condition you, family condition you, the community condition you to act a certain way and to behave a certain way. The only thing I thought about at the time was to kill myself. I thought about ending my life a couple times. I was actually the first Sudanese girl to be in the United States Army. Not only just United States Army, but to actually be an officer in the United States Army. But let's say my family was, you know, never made it to America. They were in the refugees camp. I would be a mother of maybe 10 kids by now. I would have no education. So by the time I was 14, 15, would have a couple of kids. I might have been a grandma by now, wearing no clothes, fishing water from the river, collecting woods. My life completely would have been 100% different. All right, my name is Nyajuok Doluony-Shared. I am from South Sudan. I grew up in refugees camp called Dima refugees camp. My family migrated to the United States when I was 14 years old, and I found myself in an arranged marriage at the age of 14. My oldest daughter is now 20. I had her at 17, but I followed my dreams. I went to school, got my Bachelor of Science in Nursing, and joined the United States Army. So I just retired as a captain in the United States Army and decided to share my life story in a book called I Am My Mother's Wildest Dream. It's right here. And I'm currently on book tour with my team, and we are here in Kenya. It's our first stop. We're going to be stopping at six different countries to share what it's like to be an African woman, a mother, and how we can also realize our dreams. So coming to America for me was a shock. It was a culture shock. It was a personality shock at the time. We arrived in June of 1999. And, you know, growing up in a refugees camp, we rarely see white people, you know, and that's basic, right? So the infrastructure was different. The culture was different. So our first entry to the United States was in New York City. So you can imagine the first thing I saw coming from a refugees camp, hut houses, no electricity, no paved ways, roads, no running water, none of that, and seeing this beautiful #1 city in the world, New York City, for the first time. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. I remember sitting in the airport and looking through the windows and seeing all these big buildings, plane. You know, when I was in the refugees camp, there's a saying that people always said that America is like going to heaven. You know, they said it's glass floor, you walk on glass, like you can see yourself, the food come by itself. And so I was imagining all these things, and I can definitely see that I was in for a shock. And then in the evening, we got flown to Rochester, New York, where we would resettle. We got picked up in a white van by a white lady named Jane. She picked us up and took us to her house. You know, we didn't know how to switch on lights. We didn't know there was food in the fridge, but we didn't know what a fridge was. We didn't know what a stove was. I remember with my sibling just really struggling, trying to figure out what things were in the house, the shampoos, the lotion, the toothpaste, because they didn't explain. You know, there's some things that sometimes we just assume they are so basic, and we think that everybody know what they were, but we really didn't know. We didn't know. My sibling and I ate cereals for days because that's all we could. It was familiar. You know, we have a similar food that looks like that in our culture, and that's all we can eat. You know, we didn't like pizza. We didn't like hamburgers. Nothing. You know, and then we went to school. And I met two friends, a Somalian girl named Patuma and I met a Bosnian guy. I don't remember his name, but they were my first friends. And I think the reason we connected was because they were refugees too, you know? Because I don't remember having a native or American friend, especially my first 6 months. They were refugees, and they welcomed me, they loved me, they showed me, they gave me my first ice cream. They showed me where to wait for school bus, and that was nice, you know? That was the first thing that we connected right away was we were both refugees. We were, all three of us were refugees, and we knew what it was like to be in a foreign land. And there's something about our childhood that's always part of who we are, you know, no matter how old you are. And my childhood was all in Dima refugees camp, so I really like to talk about that. I'm 37. I'm a mother of 3 children. My oldest is 20, so you can do the math. I had my child very young. And I had her young because I found myself in an arranged marriage at a very young age. And the surprising part about that is that it was in America. There's a lot of immigrants communities that immigrate to different countries, but yet still practice their common laws, their norms in those countries. And South Sudan is very much so. So I was married very young at 14, had my daughter when I was 17. But I think what made me very different, or what made my fight strong for the cause I'm doing now, is because I find myself in a different room, in a different environment. I move away from the community because I was angry. I was a young teenage in my early 20s. So I wanted to move away from the community. So I pursued my career. I went to school, got my Bachelor of Science in Nursing, joined the military, and I did that with my daughter. So because of the environment I was in, I met certain people that mentored me and shaped who I am today, and shaped my vision, you know, my vision to one day go back to South Sudan and help. And I actually, let me take you back. As a South Sudanese woman in America, I found a freedom that I would never had if it wasn't for America. And I vowed to myself that I would never go back to South Sudan because I know what it's like to be a woman there. Never want to go back. But then I was in college, and I watched this video, and it was an Indian guy. And this Indian guy, it was a sociology class, surprisingly. And he said he was educated in America. He had an engineering degree, then went back to India. He went back to India and completely changed his village. He said, before I came to this village, there was no electricity, there was no washing machines, people were still using their hands to wash clothes, but he went there and made it different. But one thing he said was, if I had done what I did now to my village in America, it would be so small, not many people it wouldn't make much difference. But he said, because I did it in this village where it's where it's needed, people are grateful, and he can see the gratitude and the lives change. He said, that's why I'm here. And just as at that moment, I knew I was going to go back to South Sudan. You know, I said, I'm going to go back to South Sudan, you know, because it doesn't matter how many skills I collect in America, it would just be another skill set, you know. But if I take it back to South Sudan, I know it would make a difference. It would change lives. So I was in my early 20s at the time, and it's been over 15 years, and I have worked toward coming back to South Sudan. So I went back to get my master in public health because I had visited South Sudan in 2012, and I saw how much they in need of public health. So I went back to America and got my master in public health so that I can come back. Yes, I'm a South Sudanese girl in America. I have freedom. I can be anything I want, and certainly I have been anything that I want and can still be. But there's just so many other women out there that cannot be, and I want to let them know that they could be. I want their fathers to know that their daughters have dreams of their own, and give them that chance. You know, their sons, their young boys have dreams. Let them be. You know, so that's really my motivation. Is because I know there is needs. I've been that child. You know, I grew up in 2 refugees camps. my family, you know, in South Sudan, we had a civil war, and it's been going on for a long time, my whole age. Um, when I was 3 years old, that's when my family, our village, got destroyed from the war. My family moved to a camp called Yiting Camp, and it's border to our states, Upper Nile State. So they moved there. I don't have a lot of memory of that camp because I was young. But I do remember in 1991, Ethiopia had a war, and we were in that camp at the time. That's when that camp was closed down, and they moved us to Dima Refugees Camp, 1991. At that time, that's when my memories start forming. So I remember part of that war and seeing dead people in the river, and it wasn't a big deal because it was, oh, just push it over and you collect your water. And things like that don't traumatize you until later. If you think it's normal at the time, then later something else trigger it and you realize, oh, that was not normal. And that memory, I remember it, but it didn't bother me until later on. Other things pile on top of it. But in Dima Refugees Camp is really where, I have all my memory. And being in the camp, and I don't know, somebody that have not lived in a camp can really picture not being able to have your own food or waiting on somebody else to bring you food or water or tell you, it was difficult. It was difficult, and we lived there for 7-8 years. There was a lot of insecurity, and food security was definitely the number one, but there was also physical security, physical issues. But food security and water insecurity was my biggest memory. In the UN, and I imagine all these camps are the same, in the UN, they bring us food. They bring food every 15 days. So every 2 weeks, we would get food. So on the 1st of the month and the 15th of the month, they would bring foods. And the food were allocated on like a jug, I don't know, it's not a gallon, maybe a half a gallon. And each family member get a gallon of corn, a gallon of, if it's wheat, it's a wheat, but it's one stable at a time, and they alternate between corn and wheat. Maybe 6 months we'll get corn, every 15 days we'll get the same corn, and then wheat alternate. So we get that. They will bring corn, they will bring lentils or beans, so different type of beans, and there's a whole lot of beans out there. They will bring us oil and then salt. That's all we ate for 7-8 years. And if your family want anything different, they would have to either sell the corn, sell the oil, or sell the salt. Take it to the market, sell it, and then buy something else. And my mom had to make that last for 15 days until the next food, So there was a lot of malnourishment from especially children and elderly because the food was not enough, but also they lacked the nutrients that our body needs. So I remember my mom would go to the forest and collect dry woods. They would go collect dry wood for two purposes. One, to cook, and you're probably familiar, we make these 3 stones, put your pot on it. So underneath the stone, you put your dry woods and you cook your food. So they would collect wood for cooking, but they also would collect woods to go sell in the market. They make bundles, they go sell them. So that's how she raised us for 7 years. Okay. That wood collection was very dangerous for the women because sometimes there's different tribes, different rebels in the woods. They would get raped, get killed, and sometimes animals, snakes, they get attacked. I remember growing up, by the time I was 8 years old, 9 years old, I was able to do the same thing, In our culture, this is a woman task. So as a young girl, she was raising me, preparing me, teaching me to learn how to be a wife one day and to be a mother. So I did the same thing. And at the camp too, the water was a problem. We have these water locations throughout the camp. There was over 5,000 people in the camp. And these water tabs would turn out 3 times a day, you know. So you have to be there on time, otherwise you will miss because there's always a long line. So you have to take your water jug early in the morning, collect them, and they usually run about 2 hours, 2-3 hours. They will get turned off by somebody we don't even know. We don't know where they get turned on. We don't know who turned them off. We're just familiar of what time it's going to open and what time it's gonna end, and you have to act accordingly. And in Ethiopia, it's almost like this type of terrain. It rains a lot, so sometimes when it rains, the water pipes would break. So you would see a bunch of women line up to go to the water pipe to go collect. So those were some of the big challenges. My mom found herself sometime going to the shops, asking different restaurants owner if they need any help, and sometimes they'll pay her with leftover food, and she will bring us leftover food, and that's what we would eat, especially when we didn't have food in the house. 7 kids, you know, so to reflect back on that and know where I am now, it's really a miracle. So, and that's all we knew. And that's the thing is, you know what you know until you know something else, you know? And we were happy. We were happy because we didn't know. I didn't know. I was young. I didn't know any better. I didn't know I was missing anything. I thought everybody lived like that, you know? But now I know not everybody lived like that. You know, growing up in the camp, I always see some of my friends leaving, you know. They would be gone, and we would be like, where did they go? You know, oh, they went to America, or they went to Canada, or, you know. We have a one word for all of them. We said they went rar, which means they went outside, you know. So whether it's Europe, Australia, or Canada, or America, it's all they went outside. I guess it's outside the camp. So I always knew people were leaving, but I didn't know, like, what's the process. So in 1997, and in my book, I wrote about it because I recently just discovered a picture of me and my brother from, it's the organization called Save the Children by Swedish. And somebody sent me a picture of me and my brother that they discovered our pictures in their galleries. So I guess they had, when they went to the camp in 1997, they went to schools, and I was in primary school, and they interviewed all of us young kids. And they took picture of us and interviewed us, and somehow they sent forms. We call them forms. It's these forms they sent to the camp and said, give to, and they usually will allocate these forms based on positions or age. So they brought forms to our church, and my dad was handed a form to fill out. My dad said they really didn't know where they were going. They just knew they were giving form to leave the camp for resettlement, but they didn't know where. So he filled out these forms, put all our names in it, and then they turned them in. So they did this interview. They interview us. They interview our parents, really take them back to the war, like, you know, what happened? Why did you left your country and things like that? And then from those, they will decide, like, who passed the initial screening. And they would put all your names on a wall, you know, just by family names. So our name was there, that we passed the initial screening. Then the next step was we were going for a medical check, and they would take us to Jimma. Jimma is in Ethiopia, like 3-4 hours away from the camp. So they came, put a bunch of families member in big trucks. They took us to Jimma for a medical check, and they would do all kind of medical check. Again, we were young. I didn't know what they were looking for, but I heard they were looking for like STDs, looking for chronic diseases. So they did all that medical check, and then we would wait to see if our names would show up again in the forms. So our name showed up again. And they said, you guys were, you know, going. At this point, I believe my mom and dad had identified we were coming to America. But the location in which your family would be resettled, you never find out until you arrive. Yeah. And the way they said they did it, I later learned we came through an organization by Catholic charities or Lutheran services. So these were the organizations that were bringing immigrants. And what the UN would do, they would go to these charities, organization, Lutheran or Catholic churches, and they would go to and ask them if any family want to sponsor a family from the camp. And so it based on who volunteer to sponsor, and wherever they are is where that family would go. So our sponsor name was Karen. Karen was in Rochester, New York, and she was part of the Catholic charity organization that sponsor us, and that's how we end up in Rochester, New York. After medical check, I knew we were coming to America. That's when I first found out we were coming to America, and it was exciting. It was a new thing, but I didn't know. I didn't know what I was expecting. I just knew people said it looked like heaven. They say food come to you by itself. The plate is eatable, so all that stuff. My whole family came. My sister, I have a younger sister, the one right after me. She didn't come at the time. And the reason was my cousin, who's in Australia now, she had just lost her husband in the camp at the time. And she has 2 young children. Her brother-in-law was in America already. So her brother-in-law asked her to bring the kids to Addis Ababa so he can help support the kids in Addis to leave the camp. So when she went to Addis with her little children, she needed help. So she asked my mom if my sister would go to Addis with her. So my sister went. And as soon as my sister went, people start getting killed in the borders between, you couldn't travel between Ethiopian cities. So people would leave Dima refugees camp and somehow end up being robbed, being killed on the road. So my dad couldn't go get my sister, and my sister couldn't come to the camp. So she was in our form. She was supposed to come with us, but she didn't come until almost 4 years later. So my family didn't stay in Rochester, New York for too long. Right away, within 6-7 months, we arrived in June. By March, we left. We were in Omaha, Nebraska. And Nebraska is part of a region called Midwest in the States. So, States is divided like Northern, Southern, East Coast, Midwest. It's in the center of the States, and that's where Nebraska is. So how some of the adjustment that I had to make personally and some of the adjustment that my family had to make was moving from New York. That was one of our first adjustment to the Midwest, and there was few reasons. And if you do some research, a lot of African immigrants would settle in the Midwest area, and the reason being is it's quite a few, but some of the contributing factor was some economic reasons. America is very expensive, and in the Midwest, they have meat factory companies where these families can go and work in the factories and support their families. In South Sudan, we have large families. So there's families of my family with 7 kids. So my dad was no education. He was working in New York. He was put to work right away, but it wasn't enough. We were living in 2-bedroom. We were in 2-bedroom house, 9 people, 8 people at the time. And some of us were living in the living room, which was not a big deal because at that time it was way bigger than we had before, right? But people had already, migrated to the Midwest, so they called my dad and said, "Bring the family here. You'll be able to get a better job that will support you and your kids." So my family moved there for that as well, and also healthcare. My mom got really sick as soon as we got to the United States. She was hospitalized, having multiple surgeries. She had already had 2 surgeries while we were in New York. And this was a sickness that she had prior in the camp, but of course it was in the camp, it was never looked into. So when we got to New York, she started seeking medical attention, and medical care can be very expensive in America. So we moved there for that as well. It's called Medicaid. It's for poor people. But see, the biggest challenge is when you put a lot of immigrants together, there's no progress, and that's where we found ourselves right away, is that we start living the way we were living home. There was nobody to help you dream, to shape your mental ability to think differently. And I think that's still the biggest challenge right now that we face in America, is that these immigrant communities live together and they're not prospering because their minds are not being changed. There's nothing new coming in to help them see things differently or to vision for themselves differently until you move yourself out of that environment and meet new people and have some mentors, you know. So that was a big challenge. That's how I started finding myself in arranged marriage, because they were still practicing the same common laws, same norms. The environment, even though the environment changed, the people themselves didn't change. The rules didn't change. There was a lot of things that were still being practiced under the table that the law didn't know, these arranged marriages. And I was in a very delicate age at the time, because I was in an age where in South Sudan, I was old enough to get married. You can go to South Sudan right now and 14 years old are having kids, being married off, because that's the rule there, you know? So it wasn't, I had no ground to say I was young, because according to our culture, I was not young, you know? And they were practicing our cultural law in America. So they arranged my marriage. We came with a family from Dima refugees camp that knew my family very well. We knew them very well. And they were the one that introduced their nephew to my family and said, and their nephew has lived in America for quite some time, since 1994. And by that time, he was ready to get married. You know, he was old enough to get married. He was in his late 20s, early 30s at the time. You know, and that's how they introduced this marriage. My only ground that I had to use to say I didn't want this marriage was for education. I said I want to go to school. But then they feel like that's not a big deal, because he wasn't, according to my dad, he wasn't going to stop me from getting my education. According to my dad, my education journey was supposed to end at high school. He said, you are to stay with the family until after high school. You can't move in with him until after high school. And that was the agreement. And after high school, then, you know, you be his wife. So that was how far I was supposed to go in education. But I wanted more. So my fight for my own freedom started. And it was a long one. Yeah, so we had a lot of family problem, trauma, fights, a lot of beating, physical abuse. Yeah, I remember, I believe I was probably 15-ish, 16. My dad told my brother that he wasn't going to give me a ride to school anymore, and I was to find my own way to school. So I was taking school bus to go to school, while my brother take the car and drive himself to school, and I go to the bus station and take a bus. Well, because I wasn't listening to him. I was being rebellious, and I was becoming Americanized. A Sudanese girl is not supposed to act like that. I was supposed to listen, obey, and go along with whatever they decided. And at that point, I was very vocal. You know, I told them to give one of them to the guy to marry him. So that was not okay for my family to hear me say that. So the physical fights continue. There was a lot of beating, a lot of hitting. I found myself in the hospital one time because I was knocked unconscious by my brother. And my family left us. They left us in the room to fight. So he knocked me out, went to the hospital. But again, it's really weird. You know, when I was at the hospital, they asked me if I want to press charges. You know, in America, we have laws. And that probably would have been my time to tell them what was going on at home, you know. And I was still too young to be removed. I was still underage. I could have been taken away from the house. A lot of my friends were being taken away from the house because of the same stuff. But I told them that I wasn't going to press charge my brother. You know, they condition you. Culture condition you, family condition you, the community condition you to act a certain way and to behave a certain way. And of course, I didn't, you know, I said I wasn't going to press charge my brother or call 911 on my family. The only thing I thought about at the time was to kill myself. I thought about ending my life a couple times because I feel like that was easier for me to do. I would be punishing them, I think. But if I called 911 on them and have laws come either take me away or put my brother in jail or my parent, one, I didn't think, the law would believe me or the community would believe me what was going on at home. But two, I didn't want to embarrass my family to do that. And, sometimes I look back and I'm like, fuck, I should have done that, But yes, I had my child at 17. I moved in with a guy. We start having our own issues, that has nothing to do with my family, but it probably was already underlined, right? There was already underlying issues from the beginning of the marriage. But I left him he left me. He moved out by the time I was 19. I was 19 years old. I came home one day because we had been fighting for a while, a lot of fight. In fact, I was arrested and put in jail. No, but seriously, there was a lot of physical abuse as well between him and I. So I went through that. I went through fight, beaten, and physically hurt by my own family, and then again with this guy. But by the time I was 19, we were done with our marriage. So he moved out, and I became a single mom with our daughter. She's now 22, and she really has no relationship with him either. They don't, and that was his own decision. But she's grown up to be a very independent woman. But I persisted with my school because that was the basis of my argument from the beginning, that I wanted to be in school and I wanted to show my family that I meant what I meant. So right out of high school, I went to college, and my mom was very supportive. I was struggling a lot, but a lot of my circle were struggling the same way. There was a lot of motherhood, like single motherhood, that was happening. And it almost became a norm, and it's okay to be a single mom. Just continue the cycle of poverty and the cycle of abuse and the cycle of struggling was almost normal, But I think one thing I wanted initially when I continued with my education was to prove myself to my family that I wanted to have an education. I wasn't just playing. And I wanted them to accept me and to love me and to see me that I could have an education, So I could be like my brother, especially my older brother. I had a lot of negativity feeling toward him growing up. And I wanted to show them that I'm just like him, or I could even be better, So I did all these to prove myself, to show my worth, to be accepted. But later on, right after my high school or my college graduation, I realized I got up in front of the members. My mom and dad called everybody from church to come have a prayer, and for my graduation from college. So we had a church full of people, and they gave me a chance to get up, and that was one thing I remember saying is that from now on, I will not do anything else to prove anything to anybody. I will do them for me. And I think my family remember that, because that was me liberating myself. That was me saying, I'm my own person now. You no longer have control over me, and I will do whatever I want to do. It's no longer about you. It's no longer about me want to be loved or want to be accepted. I'm going to do what I want to do for me. And I got up and I said that in front of all of them. And that was weird too. I cannot do anything for anybody else anymore. I did that for so long, and I was 23 years old at the time when I said that. And looking back now, I'm like, wow, I'm glad I learned that at such a young age. I liberated myself. I started living for me, living my life, and it's different. I feel free. And my family they know now. They advise me, they give me a console and they tell me if something is wrong, it's right. But they surely know it's my right to either accept their advice or to decline. I was actually the first Sudanese girl to be in the United States Army. Not only just United States Army, but to actually be an officer in the United States Army. there has been few girls after me, and I'm very proud of them, but I was the first, and it was unheard of too. um, so I joined the Army for three reasons actually. One of the reasons I joined the Army, as you can see, I'm a girly girl, so I like my dresses, like my heels, and I like to, I'm glad I'm a woman. I like that. To be in boots and to wear a uniform and to fire guns and not wear makeup, that's really, really something I didn't think I would ever do. But I'm glad life is always throwing things in front of us to change our course, and most of the time is for better. My brother quit, my older brother, had joined the Army prior. So Quid joined Army right out of high school. He graduated high school in 2003, and you know what happened 2001, September 11 happened. So Quid joined high school joined the Army right out of high school. And he went in as enlisted. He was actually the infantry, so it was the gunman, right? He was actually a gunner. He was deployed to Iraq in about 2004, 2005. But when he came back from Iraq, my brother was mentally wounded completely. He started suffering from PTSD right away. He had depression. He couldn't sleep. He did all kinds of things, started drowning himself in alcohol, smoking, just things to get his mind out of where it had stuck, which was the war. So in 2005, Quid attempted suicide, which really shook our family, and I was the first witness to it, or the first person that found out, because him and I are very close, regardless. You'll read the book and you'll see we had a lot of challenges, like, normal African siblings, right? We had a lot of fights, but at the end of the day, we're very, very close. He knows so much about me. I know so much about him. So when he wanted to end his life, I was the first person he called, and he was in the verge of hanging himself. So that whole process really shook our family, and it changed my life, because I started attending his therapy with him, and I was in nursing school at the time. So I started learning about mental disease and mental illness and what it would take for him to recover. So I became a support system for him. And that was actually my number one driving force to joining the Army. Yeah. I started thinking, I thought, my brother was in war, he was at war, and if he was physically hurt in Iraq, it would have taken a medical personnel to save him and bring him back to us. And I wanted to be that. I wanted to be that medical personnel for somebody like my brother, for somebody's brother. So I said, I'm going to join the Army right after nursing school. I told my brother, he tried to talk me out of it, but then again, he knew that I was going to join the Army. And I was in my second year in nursing school, so I still had 2 more years to go. So for 2 years, I did all the medical checks, all the evaluation for the Army. They accepted me. They wanted me to become a citizen first, because I couldn't join as an officer unless I was an American citizen. So I had to go through an American citizenship process. And him and I hid it from our family, because by that point, 2 years after his first suicide attempt, he had attempted a couple times. And my mom was blaming the Army for what had happened to my brother. So I couldn't come to my mom and said, I want to join the Army too, So I told my brother that we weren't going to tell Mom and Dad that I was joining, so we kept it. The second reason I wanted to join the Army, and I found out later, was student loans reimbursement. They said if you join for 3 years, we will pay all your student loan off. And that time I had nearly $50,000. So 3 years of work while getting paid, I thought, well, it's pretty good idea, good trades. So that was my second reason. But I later discovered too, I was running away from my whole path. I just wanted to be anywhere but not surrounded by Sudanese. I just wanted to be as far away from them as I can, you know? And I learned that the more I stay away from the community, the more I didn't want to come back. You know, there was just so much trauma that I felt like had been put in my life because of just being in that environment. And I was seeing my friends, what was happening to them. I just wanted to be away, you know? So I stay away for nearly 11 and a half years. I didn't come to their parties. I visited my family 2-3 days and I would leave again. So when I finally told my family that I was in the military, I was already active duty for 6 months. And I had already moved away with my daughter. I came home for my daughter's birthday. It was me, my dad, my brother, and my mother. And I told them that I had been on active duty for 6 months. And it was very disappointing for my mother. Yeah, she felt very disappointed. But my dad knew that my job was a medical personnel. It was different than my brother's job. And he tried to explain it to my mom, but she did not accept it. She did not accept it until I was being deployed to Afghanistan in 2013. Being in the Army, it was my first time moving away from home. When I say moving away, moving like literally physically being away. Because even when I moved away when I moved to my husband's home, we were still in the same city. You know what I mean? We just moved physical house location. But joining the Army, I was 14 hours away. So I was like literally physically moved away. I think that process taught me to be independent, taught me to start thinking for myself. Because if you remember, I got married at 14. And by this time I was 23, 24 years old for the first time being away and being single. And there was freedom in that. Because I was in America, I have never dated. So I was dating for the first time, you know? And not only that, I was dating in a place where nobody's going to come to my family the next day and say, oh, we saw your daughter in a club, or, you know. So I was actually exploring who I was. I was actually identifying who I am at the time, you know, for the first time. So it was really important for me to be away from my family so I can figure out who I am and who I want to be. You know, the Army exposed me to people. It taught me leadership. Army really definitely taught me leadership, that no other place I can find that, you know. I know what type of person I am as far as characteristic, you know, my values. I learned them along the road. But the people I met in the Army that mentored me, truly grateful for that. Of course, my deployments, I have some wounds, trust me, that I've learned in the Army, and not just deployment, just racism. There's so much racism in the military, you know. And I'm a Black woman and I'm an African woman. I've been passed over for position, passed over for promotion because of who I am, you know, because of being a Black woman in the military. You know, they actually put people in positions like how many white people we need, how many white female we need, Black female we need, you know? So there's that in the military, a lot of discrimination. But then, you know, you learn what battle you can fight and what battle you can't fight. So I learned to maneuver around. But one of my favorite things that I love about the Army are the people that I've met that I'm still friends with today. I remember I was actually very new in the military. I was 2 years in. And at that 2 years in, I have not been evaluated. An evaluation is, in the military, they're supposed to do it every quarter. You know, every 3 months, you're supposed to get an evaluation from your leadership to tell you how you're doing, how you can improve, some of the things that you're doing wrong that you need to stop. It's a chance to grow. And almost 2 years in, nothing. And at this point, I have people that I started my Army career with going to school, getting sent to school or getting sent to specialties to specialize in certain area in nursing and getting positions, becoming charge nurses. And I went to my leadership and I sat down and her assistant who was the captain at the time, she got kicked out of the room. She was sitting outside the room to listen in. And I opened up to my leadership and I told her, it's a her, Puerto Rican lady. I told her and I explained to her that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I need to do to get better or my next steps. And I told her I feel like, she's not being supportive. And she said, sue me. Sue me. I was shocked, And at that point, you realize what type of person you don't want to be. And that's really what I take from all these leaderships, the bad leaderships I learned, what type of leader I don't want to be, I actually got retired out of the Army. It wasn't my choice. Okay, so in the Army, there's few ways you can get out. One is if your contract is finished and you just want to get out, That one we call it ETS, like you just decide you're done with your service. It could be any time after 3 years, 4 years, whatever. The second way you can get retired is being sick, medically retired. So the Army say you're unfit for duty. So they said you are no longer healthy to serve in the military, whether physical illness or mental healthness. And that's how I got out. They say I was unfit, and I was truly unfit, and it was mentally and physically. The third way to get out of the Army is if you finish your 20 years. 20 is the minimum of retirement age or service age in the military. You reach 20 years. Anytime after that, you can decide, I'm done with my service, and you will be fully considered retired. You finish your service obligation. I was in the middle one. I was unfit for duty. I was found unfit. In 2008, 2016, 17, 18, 19, I would start having marital issues. I had remarried. We didn't talk about that. I had remarried. I met a guy when I was 28 years old, 29, married him at 30, and we have 2 boys, 6 and 5 now. And he's from Kenya. He's Kenyan. So I married this Kenyan guy that I met in the military. So we were introduced to each other. It was a great relationship from the beginning, but very soon things started to not make sense. Again, I'm a woman of my own mind. I was very career driven, wanted to have a career and take it to the highest. But at the same time, there's a lot of culture practices that I no longer want to practice in my life, like polygamy. And even though America does not support polygamy, there's still a lot of men out there that do it on the low, not marry, but, go outside of their marriage and have other women on the side. And my ex-husband was so much into that. So we start having a lot of marital issues because of extracurriculum relationship outside. And deployment, we were separated all the time. We deployed, he deployed, I leave. So mentally, I was not healthy. I was depressed, and my depression was probably the worst, 2018, 2019, to the point where I cried almost every single day for probably at least a year. Every single day I would cry. And the worst part was we were living together at home, but I would cry in front of him and he wouldn't even ask how you were doing or why you crying. I would be crying all by myself. It was terrible. Terrible to, again, I almost wanted to end my life again for the second time, almost 20 years later. PTSD. I was diagnosed with PTSD for the first time in my life. Even, you would think it would be the refugee days that would resurface and cause my PTSD, or my deployment experience. I had rough deployment too. But somehow my marriage issues, my marriage problem that I was going through caused everything else to just bubble up. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't function, I couldn't do anything. I was messing up things at work. I wasn't functioning at work anymore. So it was actually my supervisor at work that told me that I need to seek medical attention, because it was so obvious that I was not well. But it couldn't come at a better time. It could not come at a better time, because I would not have been able to do what I did, what I'm doing. Could have not wrote that book. That book, really, there was two reasons how it all became, is because of my mental health issues that I was going through. And I can see other people in my community going through the same mental health problems. I was in therapy for 2 years, mental health therapy. And I see them, they need therapy. But it was a taboo in the community to seek mental health. So I wanted to write for them to say that it's not shame to say that you need mental health. We all need mental health. Even if you're not a refugee and didn't see people die and you have not gone to war, not a soldier, we all need some form of mental health, because life itself is difficult. So because of the timing that I got out of the military at such a perfect time that I can speak up, because military is just like South Sudan culture, African culture in general. They don't like people to speak up about certain things. There's no way I would have been able to speak up and help the people that I've been helping if I was still on active duty. There was definitely a shift from the time I had my daughter to the time I had my boys. And that was almost a 14 years span. I was physically, yes, I was a mother, but emotionally I was not, for a few reasons that I didn't know until after I had my boys. One of the reasons I didn't feel connected with my daughter, didn't feel like a mother, I was just so busy. I was so busy trying to prove myself. I was so busy trying to show people that I was worth it, or I need love. I was missing something. I was so busy trying to figure out that I didn't have time to be connected, emotional connect with my daughter, And I knew that. I knew something was missing, because I would literally leave her with my siblings and not feel a thing, or, I miss her, but I wouldn't. There was something missing as a mother. There was something definitely missing at the time. My son, Moij, I had him in 2016. All of a sudden, my emotions, they all of a sudden came up. The motherly stings, the love that you feel for your children. I even considered leaving the army and be a stay-home mother for him. Something I would never imagine me doing, because from my environment where I came from, I felt almost like being a mother and being home and taking care of the kids was a way to stop women progress. Was a controlling. They were trying to control women from having a career. They want them to be a mom, when in fact it's not that. I was just missing something in my life. But having my son gave me the chance to look at my daughter and said, wow, we need a bond. We need something. I need to get back with her and show her that I love her. And it really showed me again that my mother, all these years when I thought she didn't love me, she loved me. Because as a mother, you always have room for all your kids, enough room to love all of them. So my other son came in 2017, shortly after, and the love for all of my 3 kids is the same. I can't speak for the fatherly love, since I'm not a father. I don't know how that feels like, but I can definitely speak for a motherly love, and I know my mom loved me. The things that she did in the camps was her way to show that she loves us. It was the way they knew to physically provide, Emotionally, yes, it's lacking, and it's lacked for a lot of African parents. But to physically provide for your kids, make sure they have clothes to wear, food to eat, they physically in a safe environment. That's what our parents did. That's what they do back home, But I was looking for something else, especially when I arrived in America. I was looking for respect. I was looking for validation. I was looking for for a hug, you know. I was looking to actually hear that I love you, you know. And I didn't realize that until I heard my voice. I wrote this book called I Am My Mother's Wildest Dream, How an African Teen Broke Her Silence and Fought Cultural Norms to Live the American Dream. And right here it says, it's a true story of hope, faith, and resilience. I wrote this book in a very difficult time in my life. I was still going through healing. I was still in therapy when I wrote it. So what makes this book very unique and important is because it's an experience that nobody usually like to share in public. It's the first time a culture is being opened up to a woman experience, you know. I brought my own experience as the South Sudanese woman, as a mother, into public for the first time, and it's opening doors to understanding one another as two genders, you know, male and female. We hear about men experience, and we hear it from the policies they make them about themselves or suit them. We hear what it's like to be a man, but normally we never know what it's like to be a woman, what the struggles are, because the culture tells us that our experiences belong in the house, it's belong in the family, and we should never share them with public. And for the first time, I brought my own experience out for everybody to hear, and hoping that it will give them a chance to understand their mothers, to understand their sisters, their nieces, because as an African woman or a woman in general, we have very similar experiences as wives, as mother. If we can understand what we go through, if our husbands, our brother, our fathers can understand what we go through, maybe they will be able to validate us or sympathize with us or support us in our struggles. I wanted to write my own experience because that's what I know, you know. And one of the important things that anybody that reads the book will know is that it's very honest, it's very transparent, therefore it's very difficult to read. Not in context, like it's a difficult book, but it's just emotionally difficult to read because it's true. And anybody with a mother will be able to relate to it. So the title is I Am My Mother's Wildest Dream. And I remember when we went through that title, a bunch of titles, a lot of them had dreams in it. And we had to narrow it down. So what dreams my mother did not realize that I'm realizing now, that's the title. I named it that because I'm living dreams that she couldn't live. And one of those dreams, which is very basic and is a human right that I feel like has been taken away from a lot of our women, is just right to choose for yourself, you know? Right to choose your partner, you know, to decide who you want to love or who to love you. I can tell you probably 90% of my mother's age group were all arranged. How basic is that? And we say we're Christian, and the whole foundation, the one big foundation about being in Christian religion or being religious is we have our own agency, freedom, you know? Even Jesus himself said, you have the right to choose to believe in him, that he is the Son of God. It's your choice. You should never be forced. But yet we are forcing certain people. The very basic right to be human is to choose to love, who to love. So that's one right that I'm really advocating for. Another right is right to have education. Right to have education. Right now, In South Sudan, they're still practicing this child marriage, arranged marriages, forced marriages, all kind of sort of marriages for young girls. And even though not many of them come out and say, no, we don't want you to go to school, just by forcing them into arranged marriages is denying their right for education. Because we all know by the time they become wives at 14, 15 years old, they have kids. It's a mountain to climb to be a mother, raising a kid and going to school at the same time. And I know I talked to a lot of guys and they said, oh, I'm supporting my wife to go to school. I want her to go to school. I'm encouraging her to go to school. But the amount of tasks they put on this young woman to do at the same time, she has no choice but not to go to school. So that's a right that I have realized myself, my mom couldn't realize. And there's a lot of young women that don't have that right for education. Right to have a career, you know? And I think that's with the economy that we're in right now, that should be very basic and necessity to have a 2 household income. I don't know how they don't see that. There are just a lot of women's rights that have been violated for quite some time that we have to tackle one by one and work our way up. One of the thing I like to talk about that usually, especially during this tour with the book, because it didn't show out in the book, it doesn't always come out, is it's our mindset, right? Our mindset determines our outcome. If we can help each other shift one another mind to think in a positivity, to visualize themselves in a different situation, to see their self successful and living their dreams. If you can help somebody do that, I think that would be a huge achievement. And that's one thing I love the most, because I think I got where I am right now because I had to have a shift in mind. You know, people like Camille helped me see things in a different way, and help me have a vision board. You know, this is how you do a vision board. You got to have your visions and start visualizing yourself being successful or speaking up and being heard. And I want to help those. I want to help shift minds, you know. I am standing for girl-child education. If we put our girls' education first, it will eliminate the child marriages, the forced marriages. They'll be able to get careers, be educated, because I'm here because of education, you know. People look at me right now and say, oh, you wrote a great book. I could have not written that book if I didn't went to school, you know. Instead of admiring me, how about you admire your children, your girl children, put them to school, empower them to go to school, you know. Start at home. They could be better than me. They could be the next Michelle Obama for South Sudan, the next Oprah for South Sudan. You know, we literally have these germs of gold under trees, cooking tea when they could be in school, learning, empowering themselves, and liberate their own families. So everything that I talked about, it all boil down to supporting girl-child education. Because it truly is the only way, you know. I'm hearing statistic now that I'm around here in Africa that there are more women than there are boys. So why are we not empowering our biggest population, our largest population? It's good for our society, it's good for economy, it's good for our families. It's good for our families to have a wife that takes your kids to school as a man, to have a wife that takes your kids to school and can advocate, can translate, can read the scriptures, the descriptions, will understand what the doctor is saying instead of being called, because we know, instead of being called from work, the man to come take the kids to school. Your wife can do that if she's educated. I have been labeled as Americanized, and usually when they use the term you Americanized, it's not in a positive way. It's usually in a negative way. And that's, I have a problem with people that choose and pick based on what suits them, because There's so many great things about being Americanized that they don't refer to, that they should, you know? But then they choose whatever negativity they want to pick. And usually when they say that, let me tell you what they're usually referring to. When they said you being Americanized, I mean you're refusing cultural norms and practices. You no longer want to go with your culture. You want to adapt to American culture. Well, American culture supports girl education. Okay? Yes, I'm going to adopt that because I believe it's good for our society. It's good for now, 21st century. We need to support girl education. I love my culture. And there's absolutely, it's not everything in my culture that I want to change. In fact, I don't want to change anything. I just want to adapt to things that I know can benefit us. Okay? So it's okay. I don't mind when they say you're being Americanized because I know there's also great things about being in that category. There are certain things that we should definitely not be still practicing in this 21st century. And if that means that we adapt to a different culture, like American culture, then why not? You know? I'm not here to abolish the South Sudan culture. By all means, that's not what I'm here for. But I am here to educate for women's rights. I'm here to advocate for education. I believe what is meant for each person is meant for that person. I don't think my life was supposed to be any different than the shape it took. Right? And I hope that makes sense. Because what I'm about to say next, it doesn't mean I don't consider or believe in the fate that my life took, the route my life took. I believe in that, and I meant that was meant for me, and I could not take any experience. I cannot take that back because it shaped who I am, and I don't regret anything. But let's say my family was, never made it to America. They were in the refugees camp. I would be a mother of maybe 10 kids by now. I would have no education. In the refugees camp, I was up to 6th grade. I probably would have made it up to 8th grade because that's the level we had. Our camps were up to 8th grade. I probably would have made it up to 8th grade. Would have been married. In the camp, I was actually married already. I had few marriages in the camp at that time. One of them would have succeeded. So by the time I was 14, 15, would have a couple of kids. The camp was closed down when we got our independence, 2011, somewhere right there. So it was closed. Probably would have went back to our village. I might have been a grandma by now, wearing no clothes, fishing water from the river, collecting woods. My life completely would have been 100% different. God knew exactly where my life needed to be, how to reach my purpose. So he arranged everything that had happened so that I could be where I am right now and to carry out my purpose. To get a copy of my book, I Am My Mother's Wildest Dream, if you live in the States where you can order online, it's on Amazon.com. Just type my name, Nyajuok Doluony-Shared. You'll get it on Amazon.com. And also on my website at www.iamnyatongyik.com. So again, it's I Am Nyatongyik. So it's NYATONGYIK.com. And you'll be able to get a copy of the book. And if you want a signed copy, I'll be able to sign that for you. Otherwise, we'll be on tour until August, and you can catch us at the cities nearest you.